Spoilers ahead, because our main protagonist guy Luffy is big. Like, really big, and not just in a metaphorical way. I'm literally being literal here. Luffy's powers are absolutely insane, but this giant feature in particular is absolutely perfect for a certain Elbaf. Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. My name is Liam and I want to know what the biggest thing you own is. Mine is probably this life-size resin pirate. But today we are here to talk about our now larger than life and not necessarily resin pirate, Monkey D. Luffy, who for the past 3 chapters now has been continuously shattering everything we once knew about him to the point of toon-based absurdity, and now he is a giant. Which isn't a development that came out of nowhere, and it's going to be incredibly relevant in the future as well. So let's talk about our shiny new giant Luffy and also Elbaf. But first, here's Pupcasty Ace. He's on a mission to locate the evil Dogbeard and he needs your help. Luckily for every person who subscribes to the channel as a result of this video, this good boy will receive 1 pat to help him on his way. Do not let Dogbeard win. Subscribe generously and give this boy a pat. Also, to celebrate our giant achievements throughout this video, we are going to be counting down the top 5 not biggest characters in One Piece, mostly for the purposes of contrast. So our number 5 not biggest character is Miss Buckin, Whitebeard's alleged lover, who is only 68 centimeters tall, which is tiny, and look, if this did happen, then I'm not entirely sure how Whitebeard accomplished it. Back to giants, and these big old hunks of life meat have been a very integral part of One Piece, although this has mostly been a background feature, a narrative brewing in the wicked story pot of the artistic witch that is Eiichiro Oda, something that is set to pay off in the final saga. But when we talk about giants, often the key straw hat of discussion is Usopp, and admittedly he is about as important as his nose is erect, which is fairly. But Luffy is also integral to this giant plotline, and his admiration of them has been seeded many moons ago by the plants of Little Garden, when we first encountered our lumbering legends. There was a scene where Dory was telling Luffy and Vivi about his century-long battle, and Vivi was all like, "This is stupid, you're stupid, please stop the fighting." Stop the fighting, of course, going on to become her famous catchphrase. However, Luffy silenced her about as quickly as a librarian in a place where all of the books and things are kept, because Luffy understood the pride of the giants and what this battle meant to them. He then went on to watch in absolute awe as they fought, the mere shockwaves of which overwhelmed Luffy for the first time in the series, causing him to respond with only 4 words. Too much, too big. Which is a statement that does not describe our 4th most not biggest character in One Piece, who is Papug. Papug is a sassy starfish who was able to reach the heights of the fashion world far quicker than he was able to reach any heights in the real world, because he is a mere 50 centimeters tall. And according to Google, that's about 250 CDs stacked on top of one another. CDs being things that us old people used to use to listen to various noises that we called music. Not quite a giant though. And from the moment that Luffy witnessed Dory and Broggy in combat, Luffy would be heavily inspired to reach the punch-fighting heights of the giants. Several thousand rectangles of ink and paper later, he even developed Gear Third as an homage to the giants. In fact, he even quite proudly called his arm the arm of a giant, to which Rob Lucci smugly replied that this was a cheap trick, before promptly getting smacked in the whiskers harder than King's behind on a Saturday night at his special Gimp Club. So Luffy grew the arm of a giant, and then of course he would go on to become an actual giant in an anime filler arc. In the Zed's Ambition set of honestly pointless movie tie-in episodes, Luffy did turn into a giant. However, it was under rather weird and quite frankly disturbing circumstances. Alright, so get this, they met an actual giant, right? Her name was Lily and she actually had the mini fruit, which allowed her to become all kinds of small. Stuff happened and then for reasons, Lily entered Luffy. Once inside Luffy, she decided to grow back to her giant size, but because Luffy's body is rubber, he grew with her inside of him. And long story less long, that's why we have this picture of a giant horny Luffy in short shorts and a crop top. I gotta say, kind of preferring the Gear 4th giant form myself, but you let me know what you like best. Do you prefer the Gear 5th giant, or do you like the horny crop top giant? Either is valid. Either way, weirdly enough, the Elbafian giants are probably the society of living things that most relate to Luffy in this entire world. They have very simplistic worldviews. For example, giants are proud, Luffy is proud. Giants like to hit things, Luffy likes to hit things as well. Furthermore, giants like to eat things, and Luffy, well, he likes to eat everything. And I probably sound quite flippant and jokey there, but from what we've seen, that simple life is really what Elbafian culture ultimately boils down to. Except for that one time when they don't eat, which is the winter solstice, a festival celebrating the death and rebirth of the sun. You know, that thing that Luffy just did by awakening his latent sun god powers. Gods are also quite a fascinating discussion, and this may be why Elbaf is being saved for the final saga. Because as a society, there is probably nobody who values the concept of gods more than they. Not only do they worship the sun through the winter solstice, but their guiding deity is the god of war. According to One Piece giant folklore, battles aren't necessarily won or lost by strength or even lack thereof. It has a lot more to do with who the divine powers favor at any given time. So fighting is an almost spiritual experience to the Giants, in the same way that we gather in the Church of Manga every week to watch a rubber man repeatedly punch on against a fish. But that's not all, because in Big Mom's flashback they also bestowed Linlin with the scaresome title of God of Destruction. To call them pious would be quite the understatement, as well as a statement that makes Marshall D. Teach rather excited because it contains the word pie. But now here is our third most not biggest character in the series, and it is Choo Choo! This delightsome papa from Orangetown who now owns and operates his own pet food mega complex, which is that's surprisingly canon, but he is only 40 centimeters tall, which is like 1/15 of a giraffe, and somehow there are still 2 characters shorter than that, so But back to Elbaf's religious culture, here's a fun thing that you might have forgotten. It was actually a giant who gave Usopp his now famous epithet of God, as after becoming detoyified, Aradin showed his gratitude in the only way that his culture would allow, which is by worshipping a deity. And speaking of, with all of these godly developments, I'm starting to think that's exactly what's going to happen to Luffy on Elbaf. Forgetting the fact that he's a somewhat literal god at the moment, he does tick many of their societal boxes. And when he does set foot on the island, no matter how big that foot is at the time, there is probably going to be a bout of punch fighting. Now, to be fair, much like the nature of the substances with which Usopp soils himself in fear, I do expect Luffy's reception on Elbaf to be fairly warm. Throughout the series, Luffy has had quite positive interactions with giants. In fact, he even has 5 in his Grand Fleet, although he doesn't actually know that. But what I'm referring to is more Oimo and Kashi, the only slobby giants, because the last we heard of them, they were heading straight back to Elbaf. And that was pre-time skip, way back on the cover of chapter 490. So in theory, they could have already been home for 2 years and spread the good word of Luffy to all of the giant ears willing to listen, and maybe even some of those who weren't. That or shenaniganry happened and they never made it home, which I only point out because that does seem to be a bit of a running theme with the giants. Something else they have in common with Luffy, they tend to be hopeless at getting places. But even then, Elbaf is located in a particular zone known as Warland, and I suppose the best way to understand this is by using Totterland as a comparison. Whole Cake Island was but one island in all of Totterland, in the same way that Elbaf is likely one island within Warland, which is very intriguing because I really want to know what all of the other islands in this territory are and if they're all populated by giants. Because the giants of Elbaf are far from the only mega meats in the world, and it would be fun to discover a very diverse realm of giants. However, when in Rome, and I guess I should point out that this isn't, but when one is in Warland where we worship the god of war, then we're probably going to be doing some violence. Even if it's just friendly violence. I can see a situation where Luffy has to prove himself or solve some sort of domestic dispute. You know, maybe one giant's like, "Hey, stop being such a Pakaroif." To which the other replies, "Your mum's a Pakaroif." From there, punch fighting ensues, during which time Luffy invokes his new abilities, turns into a giant, becomes the Alpha Chad of Elbaf, and everyone starts worshipping him as the god of war. Because why not? I mean, he's already a god. It's not like it would be an exaggeration anymore. It would be like calling a border collie a golden retriever. Yes, it is technically incorrect, but nobody cares because both are dog, and dog is all that matters. With that said, it's time to award the silver medal for failing to grow upwards, and that accolade will go to Leo of the Tontada tribe, who measures up at 23 centimeters, and for some reference, that is about as tall as your standard dinner fork. Weirdly enough, there is one character in the series who is shorter than Leo, and I'll give you a clue. He is not another Tontada. Nor is he Luffy, who is currently set to be worshipped by giants. However, this would also be far from another random group of people just going, "Yay, Rubber Man," because it would mean Luffy potentially gaining control of the most powerful army in the world. To clarify, when I say gaining control, what I mean is that this army starts stalking Luffy and fighting on his behalf, much like the Grand Fleet. However, this army is everything. It was even once referred to as the mightiest nation on the planet, and in Big Mom's flashback, the world government was so afraid of this giant army that they elected not to execute the giant warrior pirates just in case the Elbafians went, "Hey, not cool," and overthrew all of globalized society as we know it. And I know this is like a whole century later, but the world government were more prepared to fight the Whitebeard pirates than they were to fight the Elbaf army. Big Mom even said that with that army under her control, she'd be able to overthrow all of the other emperors, which is notable because usually the only thing she says is wedding cake. So I'm actually surprised that something had the time to come out of her mouth rather than going in as per usual. But what is not to love about this? The giants of Elbaf worship one thing above all else, and that thing is strength. A thing which Luffy has, in addition to a direct connection to the sun and sometimes now a very big body. He is 100% set up to win the hearts and smiles of the giants, ending their isolation in the same way that Luffy is set to liberate both fishmen and fart samurai. Also, what's the bet now that Luffy one day actually wears the giant straw hat on Marijois? Like maybe he stumbles upon it in a situation of chaos, forgets that he's big and just goes, "Ah, my hat," and thus fulfills a very Joy Boy style activity. Also, I suppose Joy Boy, who we assume this hat belonged to, he may not have been an actual giant anymore. He could have just been a user of this mythical Zoan who preferred to stay in big boy mode. Again, I mean, that's the thing about this fruit. It's so absurd that right now we can't really trust what our eyes are seeing anymore, because we now live in a world where big hats do not necessarily mean big heads. But he is now the shortest character in all of One Piece, and drum roll please. Or not, it depends on how lazy my edit is feeling. Do you? But the most not biggest character in the series is Bocchi. And in case you don't remember, Bocchi is a fly who was put into full body soup by Full Body in an attempt to humiliate Sanji. And in terms of size, Bocchi is about as big as one fly, which is notably smaller than all of the other things. Although in the anime, Bocchi is not a fly, but a very long bug thing. We don't know why, but hey, thumbs up for diverse casting. Also, thumbs up for this next video, because there's always more to learn, explore, and experience with this wonderful series, so I look forward to seeing you there.